Hey everybody, welcome back. Well, I guess also welcome back for me, huh? It's been a while. And so many of you are so kind, you've reached out, check on me, see how things are going. And, I've had some life stuff that has stepped in and kind of taken over. And, that's, I think, one of the things that we learn in this is that whether we're, off these meds, tapering, been off them for a while, dealing with other things, life goes on and things happen. And so I've had some life stuff that came up and sidelined me, and I still may not be as frequent as I'd like to be in the near future, but hopefully we'll get back on track pretty soon. But I wanted to come on and talk about something that's always struck me and is striking me even more now than ever. Even when I'm not on here talking to you guys, I'm always reading, I'm always working, I'm always, some would say I'm always trying to get to the bottom of things, which is actually a curse. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But more importantly, I've always been like a lifelong learner, and so that never changes for me. And it's been even more clear now as I've been doing a lot more reading and a lot more kind of introspection and reflection and things like that. And again, all of those things are good in moderation, right? But we take any of those things to the extreme and any tool can become a weapon. One thing I've learned in this, and the friends that I've made along the way who know me know this about me, but I was trained originally in kind of psychoanalytic work, which is, steeped in the unconscious and looking for kind of, digging around in the past, digging around to understand why we do what we do, feel what we feel, think what we think. And while that might have some merit, and I certainly think it did for some of my clients along the way, it is the worst possible, as far as I'm concerned, approach to take with people that are in this type of injury, a benzo injury, a medication injury, any type of central nervous sensitization. I've had people reach out to me now, having been injured by lots of other medications, whether that was antibiotics or other type of psychotropics. Some people with blood pressure medicine. I mean, I've heard a lot of different things. But what I found is that when you're dealing with a central nervous system sensitization issue, digging around and looking under rocks is not the way to go, because we get, paralyzed by our thinking, paralysis by analysis, basically. And more importantly, we are already misfiring. Okay, we're already in a misfire, a neurochemical misfire, a neurobiological misfire, an overactive, overheated limbic system that's shooting off our threat response system in all kinds of wild ways. And so everything that we're feeling, healthy people have a negativity bias in life, right? We've talked about that in other audios where, by human nature, we're designed to look for the negativity bias where things could go wrong, because from an evolutionary standpoint, it didn't help us to be gazing at the beautiful sunset. It helped us to be thinking, is there, a wild boar around the corner, that I need to be careful of. So we're kind of hardwired to do that anyway. But when we're limbically impaired, as people are, that when they're sensitized for all different kinds of reasons, that negativity bias turns into, that trash can, fire that was contained turns into like a raging wildfire inferno. So again, I think that that whole looking under rocks, getting to the bottom of things, figuring it out, if only I could fix this, if only I could, go back in time, if I could understand what this is, maybe this is something else, we can get really paralyzed in that. But I go back to, and this is what I wanted to share for the purpose of this this audio tonight, is I go back through, and the people that I have relied on in terms of like my kind of intellectual mentors in this, let's say, I realize they are all saying the same thing. And I think that when you find truth, and I wrote about this in my book, when you find truth in multiple sources over spanning thousands of years, and they've distilled it down to the same core concepts, and they don't know each other, I think you stumble upon truth. And so I'm going to share a couple of people that that talk about this, and what what the distilled truth is, what it comes down to, is that it's not what happens to you in life. It's not the circumstances. It's how you perceive and interpret, and I think also behave towards what is happening to you in life. You know, what your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are about the event or the thing that has happened to you in life, okay? And so you guys have heard me talk a lot about Claire Weekes. She was the Australian doctor who I think was really the pioneer in mind-body connection back in the 60s, and she doesn't get hardly any credit for that, but check her out if you haven't. But so, you know, Claire Weekes, obviously this is kind of where, you know, absolutely what she was talking about was nervous suffering being perpetuated, not necessarily caused by, but perpetuated by the fear and confusion that we add, right? So we've got this little cute little fire going in the fire pit, and suddenly we've got a dumpster fire, then we move to a wildfire. So Claire Weekes, for sure. And then you've got people like David Powers, one of our benzo coaches, who I just really admire and love, and absolutely focuses on mindset and focuses on, you know, doesn't deny that the injury exists or the severity of it exists, but absolutely is focused on the process through it, which has a ton to do with mindset. Then if you look outside of the benzodiazepine or medication injured world, you look at people like the people from the DARE program, who are like Michelle Cavanaugh and Barry McDonough and Aida Becco. And they're all about, you know, leaving it alone. Yes, you're anxious. Yes, you have panic. Yes, you have DPDR. Yes, you have generalized anxiety. Yes, you have intrusive thoughts. And your attitude has to be one of irrelevance and one of indifference. Then you look at people like Drew Linsalata, who has a podcast called The Anxious Truth. I love Drew. And he's got some great books out there on anxiety and on graduated exposures to deal with panic and agoraphobia. And these things help us too, because if you listen to David Powers, for example, or things that I've even said before, graduated exposures, how to begin to get ourselves moving a little bit if we can, whatever that might be. And you've got somebody like Joshua Fletcher, and he has a podcast out of the UK. He actually has one with Drew Linsalata called Disordered, and I like this one too. And again, they focus on, both of them had, Drew actually had a med withdrawal from an antidepressant. Joshua did not, but they talk about, again, your attitude towards your disordered anxiety. Now, again, you know, if those of you listening in are dealing with a benzo withdrawal or an AD withdrawal or an antipsychotic withdrawal, you know, and we're saying, well, this doesn't apply to us. I think it does apply to us. Okay, again, you know, people that have been injured by these meds, there is an actual injury, and that injury can vary in intensity, severity, and duration for sure. We may not have much say over that. But again, if we go back to this idea of, okay, I've got this thing. And so, for example, in Drew's case, he had 3 episodes of major depression and 3 episodes of massive anxiety where he was homebound, like completely agoraphobic, and had to start by like driving around his block. David Powers had to start by walking out to his mailbox. People that run the DARE program all had, maybe not as debilitating, but had anxiety. So Drew, DARE, David, Josh. And then I look in the OCD world, because what's really common in benzo withdrawal is to become very obsessive. I did an episode, the last one I think was on the cingulate gyrus, which is the part of the brain that is part of the limbic system that is impacted in this, that doesn't let us let shit go. Just doesn't. That's the function of it, is to let shit go, and it's impaired, right? So a lot of people have what we would call like benzo-induced OCD, or if they had an OCD kind of flavor to them before, it's intensified. So I look at people like Reed Wilson and Jenna Overbaugh. Those are my 2 go-tos in the kind of the OCD world. They're saying the same thing, which is drop the narrative. Okay, there's the intrusive thought. There's the scary thought. There's the anxiety. There's the fear. Drop the story you're writing about it. Chris Shorter, who is kind of a Claire Weekesian, self-taught Claire Weekesian, is out on Instagram and TikTok and has stuff. And does a lot of talking about, he has 2 keys, which is, don't engage with the intrusive thought, have a non-engagement response like, oh well, or leave you alone, or I'm not touching this, or none of my business. And then the second key is move on in your life. Okay. This is also what Reed and Jenna talk about. Then you've got people like Michael Singer in The World of Spirituality, where he talks about letting go. And his quote that freaked me out years ago when I read it, well before anything going on in my life, was everything will be okay when I'm okay with everything. And I remember getting chills. I wrote about this in my book. Everything will be okay when I'm okay with everything. I thought, how the hell do you get okay with everything? And then I got scared when I read this back in, 2015, because I thought, oh my God, is life about to show me what this quote means? And, sure enough, life stepped in and gave me a situation where it was like, okay, can you get okay with this? Because if you can get okay with this, you'll be okay, because everything will be okay. And that's the question I think all of us have to ask, no matter how we're sensitized, is, can I get okay with this? Even though it feels life-altering at times, potentially for some life-ending, it can feel like that in terms of severity and duration and intensity. The Stoics, I talk about this in my book too, but the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, again, it's not what happens to you, it's how you interpret what is happening to you, and the qualities in life that you bring forth in a daily practice that kind of help you maintain that mindset. There's a guy who does some work on perceived pain. What is it called? It's called perceived danger syndrome. He's a guy that there was a Dr. Sarno who wrote about pain from a mind-body perspective. And this guy is named Dan Buglio, and he's out of Pennsylvania. He's on YouTube and stuff. But I was looking at his stuff, and he talks a lot about what he calls perceived danger syndrome. So when he's working with people that have fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, or certain types of pains or symptoms that are chronic that don't have a structural basis to them, often what he finds with folks is their attitude towards the symptoms. They're spending hours researching them. They're focused on them. All of their content as they're speaking to other people is about their anxiety, their fear, their pain, their symptoms. And so again, we're back on this idea of how to get the attention off of the symptoms when we can. My favorite monk, his name is Nick Keomahavong. He's a great guy. He'd been like a dancer out of LA and then became a monk, and I love him on YouTube. But I just read his book on meditation, and again, same kind of stuff. Just leave stuff alone. It's not all the noise in life. It's not all the noise in our body or minds. It's what we're going to do with it. And if you're listening to this, then chances are you've got a lot of noise going on in your body and your mind, and it's noisy and it's painful. And this is not to minimize any of that. This is just to say that as I start looking at Nick and Dan and Drew and the Dare people and David Powers and Joshua Fletcher and Reed Wilson and Jenna Overbaugh, Chris Shorter and the Stoics and Albert Ellis and Beck, they were the people that started CBT that kind of built off the Stoicism. The idea, again, of it's not what happens to you in life, it's what you do with it. It's how you interpret it. It's the thoughts and the feelings and the actions that you put around it. Michael Singer, I could go on, but it was just such a good reminder to me as life came in and kind of gave me a sucker punch, as life will do. What are we going to do about it? And so it's not that mindset, not that mindset matters. Mindset pretty much means everything. It does not mean the end of your pain. It doesn't mean the end of whatever situation you have going on in your life, or whatever situation you have going on in your mind or your body. It just means that it gives you, it empowers you. It gives you a tool. And I don't know about you guys, but as I've learned the hard way many times now, my mind, which at times can be my greatest tool, can also be my greatest weapon. And so, one of the things that I think many of us can relate to is it's almost like some of us have kind of dug ourselves out of the hole, or pushed ourselves out of the corner, kind of like in a boxing match, and we get in the middle of the ring and we're actually doing some stuff. We're actually getting out and doing some things. Maybe we're working again. Maybe we're maybe we're parenting again. I was going to say adulting again. We've never stopped adulting, even though it feels like that sometimes, at least for me. But we got ourselves out of the corner only to have life or symptoms or something sucker punch us and get us back in that corner, and we're just getting pounded. And it feels like once you get back in that corner, you're never going to get out of the corner again. And that's the lie of the hole. I have a video on that I do just in normal therapy with people, that when you get in these holes in life, they lie to you. It looks all bad. It looks all dark. You can't remember that you ever were out of that hole or that you could ever get out of it again. And so, I think this idea of finding a way with courage and persistence and determination to just keep trying. And then when we get knocked down, to get up and try again, and to get up and try again, and to get up and do it again, and get up and do it again, and get up and do it again. And I think the other thing that kind of has struck me, and I've known this in my life, but it was an easier thing to swallow when my life was going along pretty well, which is the idea that, this is my time slot here on earth. I didn't earn it. It was given to me. It was granted to me. That's what I believe anyway. And I was not promised that my time slot would be easy. And like I said, that was an easier pill to swallow when my time slot felt easy. When my time slot got incredibly complicated, that was a much harder thing for me to keep in mind. And so sometimes I look around and I think about, again, none of us are granted anything in this time slot. Sucks what some of us have to go through. And if you're dealing with something that's also like an invisible illness, or this extreme sensitization that's really written off in the medical world, and you feel even more alone, that can even feel like a double whammy. But I think about, I had a friend call me the other day from Michigan, and she was telling me about a recent accident that happened in her neighborhood where 3 young boys were just walking along the side of the road between one house to another to spend the night. And a person hooked on meth came careening down the road and nailed all 3 of them and killed one of them. He had just turned 14. That's some powerful stuff. I'm thinking about not only his loss of life, I'm thinking about his friends that watched that happen. I'm thinking about his mother who heard the accident and went running out. I'm not saying any of this to trigger you. I'm saying this to say that sometimes when I hear those stories, I think, wow, because I can feel real sorry for myself. I think we all can at times, right? And I can think I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this. You didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to go through some of the things in my life that I've gone through that were terrible. This mom didn't ask, as she sent her 14-year-old, a couple houses down to spend the night at a friend's house. She didn't ask for this. And there's countless stories of that, right? Where we're like, how do people live through that? How do people, I remember doing children's hospice for a couple of years, and, I was like, oh my God, how do people do this? Not be the hospice worker, that was hard enough, but be the parent and the grandparent and the sibling. And my point in saying this, again, is not to trigger you. It's not to minimize your pain or suffering. It's to say that when we get into these situations where our time slot really looks unfair and also looks at times untenable, I have to remember what I used to believe, which is that I was granted this time and I was not promised that it was going to be easy. And so anyway, I look back on these mentors, these people, these writers that range from, from the world of the benzo withdrawal and the medication withdrawal world, to the anxiety world, to the OCD world, to the world of stoicism, back in, 250 AD, something like that, to the beginnings of cognitive behavioral therapy, to the works of Claire Weekes-Beck in the 60s, to Michael Singer speaking about it from a spiritual perspective. Max Lucado speaks about it from a spiritual perspective. My favorite monk, the people in the pain world. And so, anyway, I just wanted to come on and share this with you guys. And again, just some of my ponderings. And I will try to be on here a little bit more frequently as life settles down a little bit. And I've missed all of y'all. Hope you're doing okay.